So we're going to talk about the Meteor, which will come blazing through the atmosphere and crush you with awesomeness.
No, that's not
Also that. So what is Meteor? The Meteor site would have you think that Meteor is an ultra simple environment for building modern websites. What once took weeks now takes hours with Meteor, which is impressive, very impressive. But is it really? And like everything, it really depends on what you're trying to do. Meteor is a pretty good fit for many applications, and I have to admit that this brown bag was the first opportunity I ever used Meteor, and I found it very simple and convenient. It didn't take long to pick up the key concepts. They have a very nice documentation page, and use them to build something which is pretty impressive in a short amount of time. But is it as advertised? That's debatable. I wouldn't say that what took me several hours would have taken me several weeks writing it in another framework, but you can really, what I found is that Meteor lets you decide what you want to do and do it instead of thinking about how you're going to do it, which is something that happens to me often when I work, which is good, but still.
So you think
You decide what you want to do, and then you just do it.
without thinking.
Well, with a bit of thinking. But you don't have to ask yourself annoying questions. And we'll see why. The question is, how is Meteor capable of delivering such awesomeness? And that is because that amongst its main features, you can find fear, surprise, ruthless efficiency, and almost fanatical devotion to the Pope, and nice red uniforms. Now the question is, who here knows what I'm talking about? Anyone? You have an assignment, a homework assignment. You should watch more Flying Circus. An assignment for you. The real features are these. These are the actual features. Data on the wire. When you are talking with Meteor server from a client, you're not getting HTML. You have a WebSocket opening up, and you're exchanging data. I haven't looked at the data, but I would imagine it's magical and efficient, and lets Meteor do all sorts of cool things that it does. Obviously, on older browsers, you don't have WebSockets, so it falls back to polling and all sorts of less cool alternatives. One language. Server and client are written in JavaScript. You can even have one file where you specify all the client and server logic. Obviously, that doesn't really work for larger applications, but it's possible, and it's nice because you don't have to switch the way you think. Database everywhere. While it may not be something that you want to happen, in the initial phases of developing a Meteor application, you can just go to the client and say, I want to have a new user. He's called Bob. You just do users.insert name Bob, and there you go. You have a new user. It updates the database, and it's as if you went to the server and did the change, which is cool and convenient when you work, but it's less of a useful feature when you actually have an application that needs to work in the real world where you don't want your users messing around with your data. Latency compensation. This is a really, really great feature. Obviously, you know what it means. You make a change. The client does what you intended it to do immediately, sends the data over to the server, and assuming everything is okay, it stays that way, and if there's an error along the way, the client gets updated back with what actually happened. And you don't have to do anything special to have this in your application. And finally, full stack reactivity, which is an interesting way of basically saying that when you write your application, you decide how it has to look, you set up your bindings, and you don't have to worry about updating anything. You write what should be on the screen, how it should work, and Meteor takes care of noticing when your data changes and drawing everything accordingly.
Regarding WebSockets,
Yeah.
aren't they stateful? They even say that
You have an open connection.
you have an open connection.
Yeah.
So is it scale?
That's a good question, and we will get to that later. I was wondering that. The quick answer is there is no answer. I mean, there is an answer, but it's not easily available. Additional toys. These are really nice toys to have. You have your hot code pushes. Not only when you develop, you write a new feature, you want to send it to the server, you just deploy it. And everyone connected to the application at that time receive the changes almost transparently. It just works, which is nice. Smart packages. Basically, think Ruby gems. These are packages. They add functionality and abilities to your application. You just add them in and use them. CoffeeScript is a package. Local storage is a package. Currently, you can't write your own packages. You can write your own packages, but the API isn't finalized, so they recommend you do not write your own packages. And easy deployment. Deployment is super easy. It can be super easy if you deploy to Meteor's provided framework, provided infrastructure. They offer servers for free. I have no idea how capable these servers are. Probably not really capable. You just go to your application directory, Meteor deploy, pick a URL, and then your application just goes there and lives there and is happy, so happy. If you don't want your code running on their servers, you can just, I don't remember the command, you get a tar file and you just throw it somewhere where you have Node.js and Mongo and it works. So, demo time. You don't need to believe me that it's simple and powerful. I will show you that it's simple and powerful. And the question is, how will you see it? For some reason, many frameworks that claim they are super easy and fantastic say, look at our amazing application, it only took us 5 lines of code. I think that lines of code is a really stupid way to measure simplicity, so let's look at some code and what it can do, and if you understand it simply, then I believe it's pretty simple. So, let's see what we'll be looking at first. How do you make this go away? Okay. So here's the application, Le Chat du Fromage. And this is your basic chat application. You log in. And here we are. Let's open up another browser. No? Right? Oh, there we go. The piece on. So here we are, 2 people just chatting around. And this took me about, I'd say, 2-3 hours to write. First Meteor application I ever wrote. And I think, personally, it's pretty impressive. And it was important for me to do this because, hype is nice, but trying something for yourself, you can really see that there are flaws. There are flaws. Meteor isn't perfect, and we'll talk about the flaws later. But first, let's talk about the code. So, let us start. Basically, the entire application, 3 files. You have your CoffeeScript file. I use CoffeeScript. Live with it. It's readable. Your HTML file and a style sheet. It's written in stylus, however you like to pronounce it. Let's look at the code. We'll start with the HTML code. So basically what you have here in your body, apart from the awesome title, are 3 templates. Sign in, participants, and the chat room. Sign in is where you obviously sign in. We just have a form. You can write your name here, push a button to sign in. This is run-of-the-mill, nothing special here. Participants, we actually have some logic. Meteor uses handlebars for templating. though you can theoretically use anything you like. So if we are supposed to show this template, then we obviously show it. We have our participants here. For each signed in participant, we list his name. And then we have the chat room where we go over the messages, show the text, and at the bottom have another form for saying things. This is, a small bit of HTML, pretty straightforward. Let's have a look at the code. So what we have here are two collections that we define, the participants and messages. And this is the only CoffeeScript file, works both on the client and the server. The way this happens is you ask yourself, are we on the client? On the startup, you create a placeholder participant and get a unique ID stored in your session. When you click on the sign-in button, you grab the name from the input field. This is actually one of the most glaring flaws in Meteor at the moment. There is no two-way binding. If you want to get values from an input field, you have to actually go to the field and get the value, which is a bit annoying. Then we call a method that the server exposes. Let's jump to the bottom here. You can see that the server has some methods. One of them is sign in. We'll look at it later. Basically, we send our ID along with the name and have a callback here that marks us as signed in. Here we assign a function to the participants template. Let's see where we use it. Back here when we were in the participants template and we said each signed in, this was what we were talking about. You just assign functions into your template and then they're available in the HTML. We go over the participants, find all those who are signed in, nothing special. We only show the participants template if we are signed in. Here's a function for sending messages, nothing special. Eventually calls the server and tells him, say this message, clear out the input field for messages, some event handlers. Now we're handling the chat room template, nothing special. Here are the messages, whether or not we should show the template. And here's just a bit so that every time we render the chat room, we jump to the bottom of the list of messages so that you don't have to keep scrolling down when people talk. And this is the entire code for our server where we allow users to sign in, put them in the database, write a message that they joined, and when someone tries to speak, we insert the message into the message collection. This is the entire application. It's pretty straightforward. You can read it, understand it, nothing special, and it just works across different browsers. Theoretically, if someone has a computer here, you could connect to me and we would talk and it would be super fun. What we could do is deploy, you never saw that, the application to...
Yeah, just a question.
Yeah.
These two parts, this server, this client, I assume that when you send it to the deployer,
yeah, the client sees the code. If you don't,
sees the server.
Yeah, sees the server code, which is bad,
Okay.
obviously. But this is only, it's a silly application. In a real application, you'd set up your tree differently, where you have a server folder that never makes it to the client, and you have a client folder that never makes it to the server, though it has nowhere to go. So then the clients would obviously not have the code.
So if you have this server, so if you have this directory structure, you don't need this if.
Yeah, obviously. Also, you could definitely have more than one file with code in it. Another thing that's not supposed to happen is that, as I said, we can just go to the console here. Man, the screen is tiny. And say messages, insert, look at me, I'm a message. Yeah, and this will actually do something on both browsers because you went and you changed the data. This is also something you can prevent, but it wasn't necessary for the purpose of this demo.
It's okay. I just
Yeah.
want to understand.
I just want to understand something. When you change the data, it's automatically trigger a function to call to send a message.
Where? When you change the data, what happens in this case specifically, obviously it's implementation dependent. What we do is well, actually, this has nothing to do with the code, obviously, because I just went into the console. But what Meteor does is tell the server, hey server, here's a new record for messages, sends it that way. The server, if everything checks out and there are no validation problems with the message, then just sends it to all other clients. So this was the demo. It's theoretically available if we press enter here. Wait for it. Okay. So now we could go to cheese.com. Say, Leo, you have a computer. Why don't you go to cheese.meteor.com and prove that I'm not just lying to everyone? Who is Tim? Actually,
Send him a message.
maybe I have no idea who Tim is. I can only imagine that somebody already used cheese@meteor.com. There was some data here. What? Who is Tim? You are Tim.
No, I just made it talk.
What? You eating? It was me.
So it actually works, and you believe me now. Yay! Back to the slides. Okay. So, I think you can now believe me. It's actually pretty simple and powerful. You can make bigger applications than this silly little thing with Meteor, and they work. But I still wouldn't simply run and use Meteor for everything, even though it's powerful and nice, because it has some glaring omissions that are really expected from something that claims to be ultra simple and web application friendly. And these things would be routing, two-way form binding, server-side rendering, internationalization. You know what I mean. Internationalization. There, said it. And form validations. These are pretty glaring issues at the moment, though in Meteor's defense, it's only in some sort of pre-release stage thing, 0.6 whatever. So they are supposed to pick up the slack on these issues eventually. Still, I wouldn't use it for production as is at the moment. And obviously, there's also the issue of performance. I desperately tried finding some figures or graphs or whatever of how Meteor performs under a real-world load. Couldn't do it. All I could find is some chat in a Google group where one of the devs said that Meteor is as performant as Node.js is, which is obviously completely meaningless. So one day someone will make a benchmark and we will see how performant this is. Still, maybe you really like Meteor, you want to use it still. With all these issues, there are a couple of things you can do. Meteor is JavaScript, or CoffeeScript, which is still JavaScript. You can just take your favorite library and make it work with your application with varying degrees of difficulty. For validations, people like to use Parsley.js. Backbone for routing, though it's really clunky, it works. There is actually a Backbone smart package you can use. And if that isn't good enough, then you have Meteorite and Atmosphere, which is basically more or less like Bundler. Atmosphere is a repository where people write their smart packages, which are not official in any way and may break at any time because the people from Meteor clearly state that the API isn't finalized and you shouldn't write your own packages. And Meteorite is a wrapper for Meteor, which allows you to easily download packages from there. There's a slew of packages, you can look through it. Routing specifically, can't remember the package name, but there's a much more convenient way of doing it. While this is great, there's no way of telling whether or not this will be accepted by Meteor later on. Maybe they'll have something of their own and this will all go to hell. So it's a risky business adopting Meteor and Atmosphere. And if all else fails, Meteor is open source. You can just jump in the code and go wild and do whatever. Maybe you'll have everlasting glory if you write something extremely useful. Derby, which is a competing framework which does more or less the same things. The people over there have a pretty good blog post. It's available in the comments of this slide, where they compare Derby and Meteor and actually point out various issues that Meteor currently has. It's a good read. Read it sometime. That's all I have to say about Meteor, if you have any questions.
When would you choose to use it? If you choose to use it?
As I said, I probably wouldn't use it at the moment for anything serious. If I was writing something for me, for fun, that was only in English, then I'd give it a go. I mean, writing up this chat was super simple, and it would probably have taken me more than 3 hours in anything else I can think of at the moment. So it's terrific for rapid prototyping, and I think it can go the extra mile, but not at this time.
Do you think of it more as a prototypical tool? Like you want to get something fast and dirty and you would use it? Or
Yeah, I mean, yes, but you might have to throw it all away when you decide you need it to be more robust. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.